Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings to you. Well, you probably know a lot of people who have been divorced. We're looking at roughly half of people who get married get divorced. And divorce tends to bring people down. Naturally, it disrupts families, sometimes for the better. I personally don't believe that divorce is always a bad thing. It is certainly how we handle it. First of all, I also, as a marital therapist, don't believe in ending a marriage unless there is some effort at marital therapy beforehand, especially when there are children involved, except in the case of continuous violence. So, if you are interested in a subject called Happily Divorced, how's that for a reframing? Stay tuned, because I'm very happy to introduce to you my guest, Teresa Harlow, who wrote a book called Happily Divorced, A Journey Through Divorce and Co-Parenting by the Golden Rule. Welcome, Teresa Harlow.
Thank you, Dr. Duffy.
Yes, you're very, very welcome. I'm so glad to have you on the show. So you have a story to tell, Teresa, and your former husband and your son actually wrote this book along with you. And key word here, co-parenting, and at some point perhaps even co-grandparenting. And so you've been able to flip what many people think of as basically a negative into a positive.
Yes, I'd say we have, and it came with a lot of intentional choices on our parts along the way.
Intentional choices.
Didn't happen by accident.
No, and hence your book, because it was intentional. So tell us what you mean when you say intentional choices.
Yeah, so, well, you mentioned that the book was written by... it was written by me and then included both the ex-husband, Bob, and my son, Ian. So the book is a family affair. I wanted to bring some credibility to it, that I wouldn't just be saying, hey, this was great, this is how I saw it, that it
right.
would really...
That's really part of it, Teresa, isn't it? That it isn't just your perspective, it's your former husband's and your son's perspective at the same time. So you really walk your talk.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what happens with divorced couples is that they get so caught up in where they're at personally in it, and they can't see beyond themselves. So in the moment where you're contemplating, this new life, you have to think about the consequences not only on you, but of course on the child, and even beyond that, on the child's other parent, and even extended family and friends.
Yes.
So that you can really navigate it in the best way possible.
Yes. And there is this burgeoning field, Teresa, about parental estrangement. And so many divorced people, so many divorced people have had their former spouses estrange their children from them by, talking against them. And it's also called parental alienation. And it's just so many books on it right now because, unfortunately, it is so terribly prevalent. And I think that's why your book is so important and should really be the antidote to what so many former spouses do to their former spouse.
Yeah, that's one of the many motivations that I had in writing it. I really want to take it from being the exception to being the expectation.
Yes.
And I have absolutely witnessed situations where parents didn't make choices intentionally, and they, use the child to manipulate each other, or maybe they see their divorce as an opportunity to get back at the former spouse. And all it tends to do is just introduce more misery into everyone's life, including the person that's actually putting that out there.
I agree.
And it seems so needless.
Right. The person is also making themselves miserable. Yeah. So
absolutely.
So you talk about intentionality, and you talk about the secret sauce, and some important decisions that you made. And did you make them along with your former husband, or maybe even transitional husband at the time that you may, even at the tail end of your marriage, talked about exiting? I'm thinking that we have so much information about entering a relationship, and we have very, very little information about exiting a relationship. The average person does not think about that.
Yeah, and you probably don't think about it until the moment it just hits you in the face. Let's talk about the secret sauce and how we got to that. So when we came to the point of separating, it was actually me who announced to Bob that I wanted a divorce. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, he said to me, you're going to miss half of his life, Teresa. Mm. And when he said that to me, it just weighed on me very heavily. And it took me 2 years to get pregnant. There was a point where we really thought maybe we couldn't have children, and spent all of that effort and heartache month after month of not becoming pregnant. And here we were, only 5 years, almost 6 years into being parents, and I was faced with losing out on half of that parenting experience. And I thought, this can't happen. And, you spend a lot of time thinking about whether you should be with the other person, but not everyone thinks about what that means in terms of not being with your child.
Right, of course.
Of the time.
Absolutely.
And in our scenario, I didn't have a compelling reason to want to keep my son from his father. Mm-hmm. We were maybe not able to live in the same house or continue a romantic relationship, but we were friends, and that's how we got together to begin with. So I didn't want to take that from him.
Right.
And I certainly didn't want my son to lose out on having his father lose out on half of his life and not be there for him in a particular moment because it was too awkward for us.
Right.
So when Bob said that to me, I thought there's got to be a way where I can, selfishly, I started with me. I have to figure out a way to reclaim some of that time I would otherwise lose. And it led me down a path of thinking about the fact this is going to be really challenging. I mean, the reason we weren't staying together as a couple was because we were dysfunctional in terms of our communication with each other. And that's normally the case with couples that divorce. You can't see eye to eye. you don't treat each other with respect. And we certainly didn't treat each other with kindness or care.
Mm-hmm.
And there were most conversations turned into arguments where one of us was trying to win, like it was a debate.
Right.
And oddly and ironically, in the divorce and out of necessity, I've found that I really had to figure out a way to communicate effectively with Bob in order to overcome that. So the one thing I think is that's interesting there is that while I couldn't figure out how to communicate effectively with Bob if I thought about what he might like or not like for me to say to him or do, I could certainly figure out what I might want to hear or what would potentially hurt me if someone did it to me. So I started there.
Right. The golden rule, as you say. The golden rule.
Exactly.
Right. Yes.
Sure. And even if you can't figure out how someone else wants to be treated, you can figure out how you want to be treated and start with that.
Start from there.
And build on it.
Right.
So that's what I began to do. Before I spoke, I would, rather than being the reactive person I was while we were married, I would, take a breath and think about what I'm about to say. How would I like it if somebody said that to me?
Right.
And what would I want someone to do for me if I were on the other side? More directly, what would I want Bob to do for me if I'm not there and I'm relying on him to be that other half parent?
Yes, it's so ironic, isn't it, Teresa, that the very skills that we need to be co-parents are the same skills that we need to be husband and wife, spouses, and yet it didn't seem that the stakes were as high with your husband as when you realized that you had to somehow recoup a lot of the time with your son for the future as well as the present. Yep.
It suddenly became a compelling enough case. Unfortunately, it didn't happen sooner. But at least it happened at that point. And the interesting thing is now that I learned this, I've continued to use it in other relationships.
There you go.
And so you can take that type of learning forward in every relationship. And that's the great thing about the book. I talk about in the introduction how I really hope some couples that aren't divorced yet read this.
Yes.
And realize that there may be a path forward for them. Because while the book is called Happily Divorced, and we did find a positive way to achieve it, it's definitely, from my opinion, more ideal to remain a married couple with children.
Yeah. In the best of all worlds.
Lots of challenges that you certainly don't have to deal with.
Right. That initial pair bond to raise the children to maturation, it's kind of like too much, too little, too late. You learn the skills when it was so compelling to keep your son Ian active in your life, and in retrospect, wouldn't it be lovely if we could rewind the tape to use those same skills? But you're using them in your current and other relationships.
Yes, and in fact, it served me really well in the relationship I'm in now. I have been in a committed relationship with a man for 12 years.
Oh.
It's coming up on 12 years.
Wow.
And we've been engaged, don't laugh, for almost 8 years. that's a whole other story, maybe.
Yes, yes. Another book, Teresa. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
But the point of this is that he is also divorced with children. And for the first, I'd say, 10 years of our relationship and trying to forge a blended family that was functional and have a amicable relationship with his ex-spouse, it was a very rocky road, very challenging.
Yeah.
And we really didn't get to spend a lot of time with his children during their younger years. They're in college now. And it only occurred to me, and I don't know why it took so long, but it only occurred to me 2 years ago that I knew how to fix this, or at least improve on it, and I hadn't taken the action to do so. There was a point where, and my fiance's name is Brian, so there was a point where Brian's ex-wife had done something very nice for their daughter's lacrosse team. She had bought, I think it was Easter time, and she had purchased baskets for all the girls on the team, on the college team, and there was an extra one, and Brian brought it home, and it was sitting on the counter. I'm like, oh, what's that? And he's like, oh, Michelle had an extra one. She said to bring it to you. I'm like, oh, that was really nice. And it just kind of sat there for a few days. And then he told me a story that she had shared with him, that one of the other moms had kind of gotten a little snarky with her about, oh, that's great. Why did you do that? And I thought, why would you have a negative, thought about someone just doing something really small and nice? It wasn't an extravagant sort of thing. It was something I think she got at the dollar store and put together for all the girls. And so when I thought about that, I thought, you know what? I think I'm going to send her a text and thank her for sending that extra one home with me. And so I did, and she was like, oh, you're very welcome. And we had this exchange, and I went on to tell her I had heard about the lady that had gotten a little upset about it, and, I wanted to let her know that I thought it was a very thoughtful thing that she did, and it was unfortunate that it was met with negativity from this other parent. And she thanked me profusely, and within about a couple weeks of that, there was another situation where their son was playing in a varsity volleyball game in high school, and he had not participated in any other sports up until this particular year, and it was something he found that he could participate in and enjoy the camaraderie and everything with his teammates. And so he was really excited about it, and they had said they were going to put him in to the varsity game this one particular evening. But Brian's ex couldn't make it. She was on a business trip. And I thought, oh, that's sad. She's not going to see and be able to take the pictures and, do the mom thing and be all proud right there. And so I snapped a picture, and I sent it to her, and I said, I know you can't be here, but at least you can have this picture. And she was, very thankful, thanked me many times. And from those two things, from that moment forward, our relationship really changed. It improved. She started including me in conversations and inviting me along to things that included the kids. And, well, she unblocked me from her Facebook page so I could see photos. And
oh dear,
just small things that had really been standing in our way of having that full experience. So, it worked, and I was like, oh my gosh, why didn't I think of this sooner? And I thought about it, and I'm like, that's what it was. I did for her what I would want somebody to do for me. That's all I did.
Exactly. So you talk about co-parenting not being a competition, and shared parenting, and building a relationship with the ex-wife of your ex-spouse. I'm sorry, the ex-wife of your fiance, right? And then other people, all the adults, and all the computations of all of these step relations and blended family and exes and steps and all of that. It is so very tricky. And I just want to say, Teresa Harlow, author of Happily Divorced, A Journey Through Divorce and Co-Parenting by the Golden Rule, which Teresa Harlow, spelled as Harlow, wrote with her former husband and her son, Ian, and that there are so many different learning opportunities, and I think that one does not have to be intimate with, say, the ex-spouse of someone to be civil. And we sometimes think that we either have to make them a part of our family and have a deep relationship versus, okay, we're getting together. You make the point that happy holidays are still possible. We're getting together and we are very, very sociable and very cordial, and we will be very cooperative as parents and step-parents, and that's enough, would you say?
Yeah, it's funny, you went through that litany of relationships, and my son kind of laughs about the complexity of his family tree.
Oh, well put.
Because there are a lot of complications, and I haven't even touched on the fact that I'm adopted, so there's a whole other branch that...
Wow.
Yeah, that lives off of that one. So, but, you really just have to... you have to be able to think beyond yourself and...
Yes.
And stop for a moment and consider all the other people that your decisions affect.
So many. Yes. And to let all involved know that love doesn't have to be parceled out, that there's enough love to go around, that the more we love, the more we're capable of loving, and what we appreciates. And there need be no competition, really. Our higher selves don't have to compete for who's the better mother, who's the better in-law, who's the better stepmom, stepdad, any of that.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of that comes from insecurity.
Yes.
And if you can reinforce to someone that they have security, then it helps them to release that anxiety and to bring down the wall a bit so that they don't, it gets rid of some of that fear that they harbor.
Right. And then you talk about step-parenting and what new fresh hell is this, and of course, of course, we're all evil. The story of Cinderella pretty much sealed the fate of step-parents everywhere. The evil stepmother. I myself am a stepmother, and I can relate to, the stereotypes and how, people believe certain things, and how do you go about defying the stereotypes and being the person that you are in your own eyes first, and then working with the various players for the good of all involved.
Yeah. Well, step parenting is different than parenting, and that's why I and you certainly know it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like having all of this great parental guidance to offer, and really having to wait for someone to ask you for it, because if you just impart it, it's not always met with acceptance, and can actually turn things to a place where you really never intended them to go, and you're like, wait a minute, all I was trying to do was help.
I know.
So it's like your influence is really diminished as a step-parent, at least from my experience. It was in the case where the other parent's still very engaged and steering the course for their children. Again, there's that threat that you represent potentially to them, and I get that.
Right.
I thought about that when Bob started seeing other people. I would kind of size them up. Is this going to be Ian's future stepmom, and what do I think about her? Whether it was right for me to judge, that's a whole other story, but you certainly are concerned about your child's safety, and what kind of principles are they going to bring to the table?
Yeah, by all means. Who is this new person in my child's life? Will they be good to them? Will my child like them better than they like me? I mean, I think we all have that part of us that doesn't always feel like we are the most worthy of love, the most worthy, and the feelings of inadequacy abound. And I can tell you as a social psychologist that low self-esteem is in epidemic proportions. That we have to close. This show has just flown by. That what I say to my audiences and my students and my clients is basically not to give unsolicited advice anyway to anyone. Just to not give unsolicited advice. And I have a thought on this, a way that might benefit you. Would you like to hear it? Even, believe it or not, when it comes to a manager talking to a report, when it's their job to give feedback, I do have some thoughts about how your project could be even better. Would you be interested in hearing it? And of course, they'd be crazy if they said no, if they're reporting to their manager. But general rule of thumb, who asked you? So to wait, you said wait to be asked, and I would add to that to offer. Would you like to hear? I have an idea about this. Would you be interested in hearing it? And if it's okay if not. If you're not, you talk about blending parenting styles, and that's tough for an original pair bond. And now you have, as Ian said, the complexity of his family tree. So one has to be very, very aware and really practice the golden rule. So Teresa Harlow, thank you so very much. And we can get your book through your website, or is it? Can we get it through Amazon.com or any of the other online?
You may get it. Yes, you may get it through either my website at teresaharlow.com, or you may get it on Amazon right now.
Beautiful.
If you're in the Columbus, Ohio area, I'm having a book launch on October 12th.
Oh, wow.
So that will be a live event where books will be offered.
Wow. That's wonderful, Teresa. So, teresaharlow.com, Happily Divorced, A Journey Through Divorce and Co-Parenting by the Golden Rule. And if you're interested in getting a list of my speaking engagements, please just go to drduffy.com. And thank you again, Teresa. And this is Dr. Duffy Spencer saying goodbye for now and wishing you great relationships.